You ever wonder what the end of the world might look like? Well, today we're going to dive into one really specific, detailed vision from a sermon by the YouTube channel Byeong-seok. We're going to walk through their interpretation of the final judgments, step by step, exactly as they lay it out.
Okay, so according to this sermon, the whole framework for the end times is this 7-year period called the tribulation. And as you can see, it's split right down the middle into two very different halves. The first 3.5 years, what they call Jeonsumnyeon Bon, is all about spiritual struggle. But that second half, the Fusumnyeon Bon, that's when things get really intense with tribulation and judgment.
All right, to make sense of all this, we're going to walk through the whole sequence of events, just as the speaker explains it. We'll start with those final 7 years, move through these things called woes and plagues, and then see how it all ends with the beginning of a brand new world.
So this 7-year stretch, it's basically seen as the final chapter for humanity. That first half is a time of incredible spiritual pressure, and it really sets the stage for a chain of catastrophic global events that are about to unfold.
Right at the heart of this timeline are 3 escalating phases of disaster called the 3 woes, or Sagaji-hwa in Korean. You can kind of think of them like 3 acts in a play, where each one gets way more intense than the last. They represent these escalating stages of global judgment.
So, let's talk about the first 2 woes. These are what really get the ball rolling for the final judgment. It all kicks off with this period of intense persecution that just divides everyone. And it all builds up to a massive, devastating global war. The first woe is laid out as a 5-month period of extreme spiritual testing. During this time, a figure they call the Beast comes to power and introduces the mark of the Beast. And this is a huge deal because it's a symbol of loyalty to him, forcing literally every single person on earth to make a choice.
And here's where the sermon makes a really critical distinction. It argues that believers are going to be split into 2 groups. You have the wise believers who are protected and taken to a safe place. But then there are the foolish believers who are left behind to face the absolute full force of what's coming.
The second woe is where things jump from spiritual persecution to just total physical devastation. The moment that first 3.5 period ends, the sermon says a full-scale nuclear world war just erupts across the globe.
And the scale of this is it's staggering. This interpretation says that the war will be so catastrophic, it will wipe out 1/3 of the entire human population. 1/3, leaving the survivors in a completely shattered world.
Okay, so right after that devastating war, the timeline hits its absolute climax, the third woe. Now, this isn't another human conflict. No, this is described as God's final direct judgment, which is delivered through something called the 7 bowl judgments.
And these judgments, they're not like natural disasters or wars. They're described as this rapid-fire series of divine plagues. And this is the crucial part. They are specifically aimed at the people who accepted the mark of the beast back in the first woe. So these 7 plagues happen one after the other, in a sequence. And each one is described as having a very specific and increasingly devastating impact on the planet and, on the people who sided with the beast.
You can see how it builds. It starts with a direct plague on people, then it explodes out to destroy the planet's ecosystems. First the sea, then the rivers, then the sun itself is used as a weapon, before darkness falls on the beast's kingdom, and it all leads to one final, world-shattering earthquake. So that first judgment is described as a really targeted attack. This plague of painful, horrible sores hits only those who have the mark of the beast, basically marking them for the rest of the judgments that are about to follow.
The second plague is a huge turning point. It expands the judgment from just individuals to the entire planet's ecosystem. The oceans, the very source of so much of our life, are turned completely lifeless, into blood.
Now, the fourth plague, this is where the suffering gets ratcheted up in a terrifying way. According to the sermon, the sun, the thing that gives us life, it literally becomes a weapon of judgment, scorching people with unbearable heat and fire.
So this entire chain of plagues is all building towards the final moments of the world as we know it. It all comes to a head in the 7th plague, one single world-altering event.
And according to the sermon, we're not talking about just any earthquake here. This is described as the most powerful earthquake in all of human history. An event so massive that it fundamentally and violently changes the entire geography of the globe. The sermon really paints a picture of the sheer scale of this. The great cities of the world just crumble. Every single island sinks into the sea, and all the mountains just vanish,
leaving the surface of the planet completely transformed.
And as if a planet-shattering earthquake wasn't enough, this whole catastrophe is accompanied by gigantic hailstones falling from the sky. Each one is said to weigh a talent. We're talking 50 to 60 kilograms, or well over 100 pounds, each.
But, and this is a big but, this interpretation doesn't just end with destruction. It actually concludes with a complete recreation of the world, which paves the way for what's called the Millennial Kingdom. And listen, this isn't about fixing the old world. It's about total replacement. The sermon teaches that the old earth is completely destroyed by fire, and in its place, a new heaven and new earth is created for the Millennial Kingdom, or Chunyen Wanguk, and this is where believers are said to reign.
So the speaker wraps it all up by framing these incredibly dramatic prophecies not just as scary warnings, but more like a call to action for believers. They're meant to be seen as signs that their redemption is getting close, and because of that, they're a reason for spiritual readiness and for hope. This whole detailed vision of the future really leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? How do end times prophecies like this one actually shape our lives today? Are they just warnings meant to make us afraid? Or are they a kind of framework for finding our purpose right here in the present?